Hey, it's Jen, the Holistic Health Boss, your functional diagnostic practitioner and expert. And this week, I want to talk to you guys about a sneaky little ingredient that is very toxic. And it hides in places that you wouldn't even dream that it would be. It's in your shampoos, in your conditioners, in your body lotion, medications, and even in your coffee. And slowly but surely, this little ingredient inflicts inflammation and turmoil in your body. And this sneaky little ingredient that I'm talking about is gluten. When I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, gluten became my #1 enemy. Gluten is a trigger for autoimmune disease, signaling the body to attack itself and causing elevation in antibodies, contributing to leaky gut and inflammation. And it also mimics thyroid tissue. So whenever somebody like myself who has an autoimmune condition related to thyroid, whenever they are exposed to thyroid or exposed to gluten, it actually causes the body to attack the thyroid even more. Now this is called molecular mimicry. So in order for myself and others to really heal from conditions such as Hashimoto's, a hypothyroidism autoimmune disorder, gluten definitely has to go. So in order to reverse my autoimmune disorder and be in remission, gluten had to go 100%. Prior to my diagnosis, I was mostly gluten-free. My household products, food products were gluten-free. When I would go out to eat, I would order from a gluten-free menu, but I wasn't necessarily paying really close attention to the places that gluten could potentially be hiding. And that's what I want to share with you guys today, because it can have a really, really huge impact on your overall health. I would, order foods that were made in the same fryer, such as French fries. Even though they were gluten-free, they would be made in the same fryer as, let's say, chicken strips and be contained with gluten. I would assume that, menus or foods on the menu were gluten-free just because they were, even though in some cases that they weren't. And I certainly wasn't checking for other sneaky places that gluten could be hiding, such as in my personal care products. And all of that changed when I got my diagnosis, and my health was really put on the line, and I had to make a choice. I had to decide, did I want to, go on suffering with symptoms of Hashimoto's, struggling with my weight, my mood, and my hormones, or was giving up gluten worth having my health and my happiness back? And I decided to choose my health over, a slice of bread, a pizza, or a pasta dish. Because it doesn't matter if it's one bite or one slice, it's all still toxic. A gluten exposure is a gluten exposure. The smaller the amount or the size doesn't mean that it's less toxic or less dangerous for you. People often think that just one bite is harmless in a sense, and the reality is that it's not. The tricky thing about gluten also is that it doesn't just come in the form of bread or pasta or pizza. It's also found in hundreds of different food products and even personal care products. And the body doesn't just absorb gluten through food. It also can absorb gluten through the skin. So if it is in your personal care products, you're getting that absorption through the skin, and that is creating a gluten exposure in your body. And in even more severe reactivity cases, I've seen where when gluten becomes airborne because of the use of, let's say, wheat flour, it poses a problem for some people. I've also seen cases where gluten-eating family members are contaminating gluten-free family members because they're using the same cutting boards and cooking utensils, and gluten can become embedded in porous surfaces such as cutting boards. So this is why when some people go on a gluten-free diet, they may not feel better because they're actually getting gluten exposures from other places in their environment, such as their personal care products or from cooking utensils that they might be sharing with their family. So when gluten enters the body, let's talk about what it does. When it enters the body, it increases what's called intestinal permeability, which basically opens up the floodgates of the intestines that now allows toxins and food particles to flow freely into the bloodstream. Now, when those toxins and those food particles flow freely into the bloodstream, the body sounds the alarm. It recognizes these particles and toxins as being foreign. And so it alerts the immune system and it sends out our troops of inflammation to fight off these dangerous bad guys. Overworking the immune system in this kind of way adds insult to injury for those of us who are dealing with an autoimmune disorder such as myself, or it can be the tipping point for somebody who's at risk for autoimmunity, and over time it can even depress the immune system for even the healthiest of the individuals that are out there. And repairing the intestinal lining is very complex. When there is, a perfectly healthy person, there is still damage that occurs. And when there are compounding factors such as food sensitivities, existing hormone imbalances, insulin resistance, IBS, stress, and infections, it makes the repairing of the intestinal lining even more complex and more difficult to do. So, and I have yet to meet anybody who doesn't have a compounding factor. At a minimum, all of us deal with stress. So when we're exposed to gluten in this kind of way, it can take as little as 3 weeks for the intestinal lining to repair itself, all the way up to 6 months for the intestine to repair itself. And that's just off of one exposure. Whether it's one bite or one slice, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months for the intestinal lining to fully recuperate from that gluten exposure. So let's define what gluten really is. So gluten is, not just pastas or bread as we commonly know it. It's anything that's associated with wheat, barley, or rye. It's part of the grain that is found in wheat, barley, or rye. It's a part of it that makes things sticky and doughy, which is why it's used for breads and pastas. But it also is used to thicken sauces and lotions, as well as a filling agent in a lot of things because it can be made so cheaply. So it can make certain food products or other types of products have the illusion of a bigger bulk at a less cost, essentially. So here's some of the common sneaky little places that gluten likes to hide: in your shampoo and conditioner, in your face and body lotion, in your makeup and deodorant, in prescription or over-the-counter medications, in supplements, and yes, even the all-natural and healthy ones, in sauces, marinades, and condiments, and any type of potato products like chips or restaurant or instant mashed potatoes, and meatballs and processed meat to kind of plump them or bind them together, and in flavored or instant coffee and tea. Now that's just a short list of where gluten can hide. So whenever you're looking at an ingredients list or looking at a menu, the things that you want to be looking for, the keywords, are going to be things like wheat, barley, or rye as any of the ingredients. In personal care products, it's going to show up in the form of hydrolyzed wheat protein. Or on a menu, it might sound like crispy, fried, or crusted. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I used to make the mistake of assuming things were gluten-free just because they appeared to be. And when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I couldn't let that slide anymore. So I had to give up gluten for good, which means that I had to get even more careful about where it might be hiding. One of my favorite products that I had to give up was my Aveda hair care, my shampoo and conditioner, which is touted by most hair care professionals as being one of the top, all natural brands, but it actually contained hydrolyzed wheat protein, so I couldn't use it anymore. Now I always ask for gluten clarity whenever I'm eating out, and I make sure that my server notifies the kitchen about my gluten-free needs. And I make sure that everything that I'm putting on my body or that I'm eating is as gluten-free as possible. Now, as much as I can try to control it, or as you can too, it's impossible to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have a gluten exposure and that you can avoid this for the rest of your life. For example, just a few weeks ago, I was out and I ordered a matcha tea latte that was dairy-free with coconut milk, and that's not what I received. I was completely dairy duped. Now, why that might not be gluten, it just goes to show in that example that nothing is ever perfect. I mean, we're gonna make mistakes and other people are gonna make mistakes, and we're all just human in that regards. So to safeguard myself against a gluten exposure when I'm out or when I'm traveling or outside of my home, here's some of the things that I like to do. I always bring my own shampoo, conditioner, and lotions and personal care products whenever I'm traveling. Like I said earlier, I communicate with the server my gluten-free needs so that they notify the kitchen even if I'm ordering something off of the gluten-free menu. And I always try to carry with me a gluten destroying digestive enzyme such as Numedica's Glutenza, or also Pure Encapsulation's Gluten Dairy Digest, or Allergy Research's group Glutengest, so that if I do accidentally get exposed to gluten in some type of food, I always take these enzymes with me when I'm eating out, and they will destroy gluten on the spot so that it's not as harmful to my body. Now just think about this. If you were to eat, some type of gluten food for breakfast, and then you get out of the shower and you apply gluten, lotion, or a lotion that has gluten in it, and then you have something with gluten in it for lunch, or you use a personal care product later in the day that has gluten, that is a continued war, ongoing war that's happening inside your body all day long when it comes to gluten. So getting rid of gluten for good played a huge role in allowing my body a swift road to recovery and remission with my Hashimoto's, and getting over and healing from toxic mold, and restoring my hormone balance. Whether you have an autoimmune disorder or not, or you have a gluten sensitivity or not, this ongoing war with gluten in your body from foods and all of these different personal care products will eventually bring your body down. So making a conscious effort to avoid gluten altogether or to minimize your exposure is something that can help to promote optimal health and restore balance to your body on an ongoing basis. So watch out for that sneaky little ingredient. Be aware and be on the lookout for it. I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll see you next week.